Hello YouTubers, and to all of my mates, no wuckin' furries. My name is Randolph Workus, Papa to my children and Mr. Workus to all those under 25. Today I thought I'd share some of my conclusions of a life lived over 60 years of personal experiences, memories and a history lesson that I feel should be shared with everyone. An early memory as a 6-year-old in 1969, being given a half day off school so we could watch the moon landing on our black and white TV screens. I remember it as if it was yesterday. You might be familiar with this photo taken from the Apollo 8, the space capsule by the astronaut Mr. Bill Anders. Isn't it just beautiful? It is the ultimate big picture. It is how I personally investigate any question. I look for and try to understand the big picture. What is happening here? I think of it as organised chaos. See the bright blue oceans and those magnificent clouds circling around our precious home planet. It is just beautiful. Divine. In March of 2011, when we had been waiting patiently for Chief Justice Paul Jersey's decision, flashing across our TV screens, a monumental earthquake had exploded in the Sea of Japan. It occurred at the junction of two continental tectonic plates around what is known as the Ring of Fire, deep within the ocean. These continental land mass plates are an accepted scientific theory that the Earth's crust is made up of several large tectonic plates which have been slowly moving since the dawn of time, perhaps some 4 billion years. It is a concept that suggests continental drift is a constant occurrence around the entire Earth's perimeter. The Earth's crust varies in thickness between, say, 6 kilometres and over 20 kilometres thick. It's amazing. It occurred to me this morning after squeezing my 2 daily fresh lemons, which I consume to swallow in combination with garlic, but that's another story. Imagine this lemon shell as being representative of our planet, and its inner core is a solid iron ball surrounded by plumes of molten magma that is spinning as the Earth rotates. Now please also imagine that the inside face of this crust as not being smooth or ball-bearing like, as it too is forever changing shape, thus affecting those plumes of magma swirling around the inside, around that iron core. Can you imagine that moment in Japan as that television recorded how the Earth shook violently for over 6 minutes with lots of aftershocks? Then suddenly alarms were sounding amongst the ruins when screams of absolute shock were heard as people noticed a wave, a massive tidal wave of over 20 metres high, came charging in towards the shore. I've read other accounts that suggested the wave reached 40 metres high. You need to try to imagine the sheer magnitude of power required within the Earth's core to be able to create such a wave. The death toll was around 20,000 people. Imagine. I recently searched the internet and apparently 165,000 people died as a result of earthquakes in just 2010. The numbers of earthquakes around the planet are constant. Just last month, there was a massive earthquake in Turkey. If you would like to learn the statistics, please just search wikipedia.org. Search for the list of earthquakes. Typically, there are up to around 2,000 earthquakes a year, between 5 and 6 on the Richter scale. It is mind-blowing. The Earth is alive, or what's known as being dynamic. Big picture, when you get it, is truly amazing. I would like you to reflect on that, the big picture. Imagine the energy it would take to create a wave of that severity. It is simply incomprehensible. It was due to those massive continental plates that are at least 6 kilometers thick being forced one under the other, compressing the molten magma underneath, creating an enormous pressure. When suddenly the plate ricochets up and recoiled, a massive earth flap, lifting the water above it and creating this massive wave. Understand, it created more than one wave. Others were sent throughout the Pacific, as far away as Sri Lanka. These statistics made it one of the largest tsunamis ever recorded in historical literature. Today is the 14th of March 2023, and an earthquake of 6.3 was recorded in New Guinea. These earthquakes occur every other day around our planet. It is part and parcel of living on planet Earth, and history constantly repeats itself. The past is also a perfect barometer of the future. The Krakatoa eruption is another recent example of the enormous power that was cocooned by the Earth's inner power. The statistics are just mind-blowing. On August the 26th, in 1883, a colossal eruption occurred in Krakatoa following a series of explosions. The northern 2/3 of the island collapsed beneath the sea, generating a series of lava, pumice and ash flows, and immense tsunamis that ravaged adjacent coastlines. For those living nearby, the events that began on August the 26th would cause the death of approximately 36,000 people and the destruction of hundreds of coastal towns and villages. During the most violent explosion, ash was sent 80 kilometres into the sky and blanketed an area of 800,000 kilometres, plunging the area into darkness, absolute darkness, for 2.5 days. The ash drifted around the globe, causing a halo effect around the moon and sun. The ash also acted as a solar radiation filter, lowering global temperatures by as much as 0.5 degree for the following year of the eruption. Temperatures did not return to normal until 1888, which was 5 years later. The final explosion at Krakatoa produced the loudest sound ever recorded in modern history. It was heard across more than 10% of the Earth's surface. Reports of what sounded like distant gunfire was reported from Australia and the island of Mauritius, which was more than 4,600 kilometres from the erupting volcano. Within a few hours, pressure waves travelled several times around the globe, and instruments measured the sudden spikes in England as well as in America. As the island collapsed under the sea into the magma chamber, explosions sent as much as 21 cubic kilometres of rock fragments into the air. Much of the remaining island sank into the volcanic crater, which was around 6 kilometres wide. The power of Mother Earth is incomprehensible. I need to share this with you, but any lazy search on the internet, you will discover this fact. Here's another story. In January 1896, A savage heat blast of temperatures described as like a furnace. Newspaper articles from the time stated the heat wave stretched across Australia from the east coast to the west and lasted for weeks. The death toll reached 437 people in the eastern states of Australia. Yes, that's right, 1896. The report showed that in Bourke, the heat approached 48.9 degrees centigrade for 24 days straight. There was no relief. People were reported falling dead in the streets, unable to sleep. People walked around the streets at night for hours. The thermometer recorded up to 110 degrees Fahrenheit at midnight. By January 24, 1896, many businesses had simply shut down. Panic-stricken Australians were fleeing to the hills in climate refugee trains. The government felt the situation was so serious that to save lives and to ease the suffering of its citizens, they added cheaper train services. People had to escape. This was the grim reality of a 24-day heat wave that killed 437 people in January of 1896 in Australia. There were bushfires burning across the country and people dropping dead in the streets. Just reflect on that. 100 years ago. There is another really interesting story which I found on the internet. The Great Frost of 1709. The Great Frost of 1709, as it was known in England, or the Great Winter as it was known in France, was extraordinarily cold, a cold winter in Europe, and was the coldest European winter during the past 500 years. This winter event has drawn the attention of modern-day climatologists in the European Union's Millennium Project because they are unable to correlate the known causes of cold weather in Europe today with weather patterns documented at the time. Now, this is not me saying this. This is according to Dennis Wheeler, climatologist at the University of Sunderland. He states, something unusual seems to be happening. Isn't that bizarre? How odd. Yes, I know what you're thinking. Well, that really is an inconvenient truth, Aircon Al would say. The world experienced a few centuries of apocalyptic conditions also 42,000 years ago. This information was a key finding by a multidisciplinary study published in science.org. That catastrophe was triggered by a reversal of the Earth's magnetic poles, combined with changes in the sun's behaviour. This major geomagnetic reversal triggered a series of dramatic events that have far-reaching consequences for our planet. The plot read as if it came straight out of a horror movie. The ozone layer was destroyed. Electrical storms raged across the tropics. Solar winds generated spectacular light shows, auroras. Arctic air poured across North America. Ice sheets and glaciers surged, and weather patterns shifted violently. This magnetic North Pole, where a compass needle points to, does not have a permanent location. Instead, it usually wobbles around close to the geographic North Pole, the point around which the Earth spins over time due to movements within the Earth's core. For reasons still not entirely clear, magnetic pole movements can sometimes be more extreme than just a wobble. Think about the evidence I just read to you and make up your own mind. Think big picture and learn how to think and not what to think. Please, it's so important. My father was born in 1929 in Hamburg in Germany. And as a child, record how Allied planes would fly through the night sky, dropping pamphlets over vast areas that were carefully crafted to demoralise the masses, explaining the American industrial complex could manufacture planes faster than could be shot down by the Germans. And the misery of the war would continue until they learned that they must surrender. It was the propaganda method of the time. Today, the digital iPhone or smartphone has replaced the Allied warplane. These machines are destroying independent thought through blatant indoctrination. The never-ending, relentless garbage that is spewed constantly is a fiction. The only explanation for constant weather change is obvious and will not cease anytime soon, and our Mother Earth is dynamic and shifting magnetic poles influence every aspect of climate. Yes, the real reason for climate change is due to the Earth's core. Molten magma, plumes swirling around under the Earth's crust, combining with the Earth's rotating wobble and the effect our Sun is anything but a constant heat source. Politics and vested interests within academia profit and rely heavily in scarring the populace and our children. It's about creating another tax revenue base to increase the cost of living and cementing poverty. It is shameful. Blaming carbon dioxide is the greatest hoax ever employed upon humanity, as it seeks to control by imposing hardship and misery the misguided view that somehow humanity is responsible for climate change. It is amazing that media outlets continue to poison young minds. There is nothing humanity could do that could ever compare to the sheer power of Mother Nature. Carbon dioxide is the most basic building block of all life on Earth. It is an invisible gas that fertilises plants. It promotes a greener environment. Farmers use the gas to promote plant growth in greenhouses. Please compare this reality based on factual records compared to the bull dust that's being peddled by those with vested interests. I ask you, do you accept carbon dioxide is invisible? If so, why do doomsday extremists always show photos of industrial smokestacks pumping out black smoke? Black. Beijing covered in smog, and blame carbon dioxide as the culprit, when in reality it is just industrial ash. How does any thinking person reconcile that? An invisible gas with black ash? There are very sinister, dark forces at work that want to destroy our society from within. This constant bombardment of a depressing future is poisoning young minds and creating fear, thus depression on a massive scale. The young and inexperienced sense a feeling of uselessness when there is no threat at all. These same scientists will quote CO2 emissions as having increased over the last 200 years and quote in parts per million, when the reality is it is amongst the lowest ever recorded in history. The suggestion is blatantly absurd. CO2 levels have varied enormously over millions of years. The constant bombardment of false information is about funding and destroying our industrial base. Wake up to the rubbish being sold. Another famous trick is to film glaciers breaking off into the ocean. Think about it. It is what they do. It is completely natural. It has been happening for a very long time. Just ask the captain of the Titanic. Computer modelling has failed to replicate climate change. The suggestion that science has been settled is insane. It's not. Let them try to disprove the facts presented in this video and watch them drown in their own bile. Oh yes, Mr. Workus is peddling misinformation. They will attempt another cover-up. The only comparison to this madness is when scientists were forced to keep intellectual thought or intellectual ideas confidential hundreds of years ago. Well, they too would lose funding from universities such as Cambridge, as their ideas broke traditional wisdom and challenged mainstream religious belief. The idea peddled at the time was that the earth was flat and the sun evolved around our earth. In an earlier video, I purposely featured the famous Brisbane floods of 1974, how they affected inland Australia. At the time, I remembered our then neighbour, an old man, his name was Snowy Matthews, explaining the experience was nothing compared to the 1956 flood. His claim was true. Flood levels were much higher in 1956. Others claimed that the floods in the 1940s were worse. I also mentioned how Cyclone Tracy destroyed Darwin on Christmas Day on the 25th of December 1974. If you turned on your television back in 1974, you would have seen Leonard Nimoy, the right-hand man of Captain James T. Kirk of Star Trek fame, using his celebrity to convince the public Mother Earth was descending into an ice age. Please compare those documentaries with those put forward by Aircon Al and the World Economic Forum, explaining oceans are boiling while surrounded by billionaires wanting to cash in on so-called green energy projects whilst destroying the environment, developing huge tracts of solar panels and scarring landscapes with wind farms that extinguish birds en masse. The idea of destroying landscapes, seeking out rare earth minerals by building massive quarries in third world nations using child labour just appalls me when they are surrounded by an endless supply of fossil fuels. It is a catastrophe. The world has gone insane. We are drowning in misinformation, or what is known as spelling. Public broadcasters, paid for by you, the taxpayer, are constantly pushing a corrupt political agenda at the expense or at your expense. Have you noticed there is never any pushback? That's because the stance has been legislated in many jurisdictions around the world, endorsing the one-sided argument. It is another example of cronyism and corruption. Take a moment and think about the big picture. What is the agenda? These same people are trying to convince you temperatures will increase by 0.5 degrees in 100 years. And oceans are boiling when they are flat out trying to predict the correct weather forecast tomorrow. Think of the photograph taken of planet Earth from Apollo 8 back in 1968, surrounded by greenhouse gases. Yes, take a close look. They are called clouds. H2O, gases. Moisture is the only real greenhouse gas, and it's been there forever. I'm asking you to inform your children their future is safe. The sun will rise and our moon will always continue to bless our night sky. I am pleading for your financial assistance. consider a donation as an investment in your own future? Then like and subscribe to my YouTube or Rumble channel, or visit our website whentheftislegal.org for access for more detailed information, and sign our change.org petition so we can start correcting our world and begin to cleanse it of misinformation. See you again soon, and always remember, she'll be right, mate. Never fear, Randolph is here. Salamat tinggal. That's for our long time friends in Indonesia. Thank you for listening to me.